After 25 years of loyalty, I was escorted out of the building like a thief. No warning. No gratitude. Just a folder and a fake smile from a man who didn't know my name 6 months ago. What Dominic didn't realize was, he hadn't just fired an employee. He just triggered the quiet collapse of everything he thought he controlled. Ruth, we've decided to restructure the client relations department. Today will be your last day. That was it. 25 years of loyalty, erased in one clinical sentence, delivered by a man who hadn't even been there a full year. Dominic Hayes, the new managing partner at Franklin & Associates, didn't even blink as he slid a manila folder across the table. I remember staring at it, not opening it, just staring. It felt heavier than it should have. Maybe because it carried the weight of betrayal. HR sat beside him, nodding with that trained, sympathetic expression, the one they practice for layoffs like these. "It's not a reflection on your performance," she murmured. "Really? Then why was I the one being escorted out by security? Does Arthur know about this?" I asked, naming the founding partner who'd hired me 25 years ago, and whom I considered more friend than boss. Dominic's jaw twitched. All partners were consulted. I knew then that meant no. I left that conference room with my head high, but my heart was in pieces. They let me pack my things with a security guard watching like I might pocket a stapler on my way out. Photos with longtime clients. Thank you cards. The crystal paperweight Arthur had given me for 20 years of service. Every object now felt like a relic from a career they decided no longer mattered. As I placed the last frame into my box, my phone buzzed. Catherine Winters, CEO of Winters Healthcare, our largest client. "Ruth, just heard something troubling about changes at F&A. Can you call me?" I looked across the hall and saw Dominic already on the phone, probably spinning some PR line about streamlining operations and fresh leadership. He didn't get it. None of them did. Client loyalty isn't something you can just pass down like a spreadsheet. It's not stored in a database or written in a policy manual. It's built year by year, with phone calls at 10 p.m., remembering anniversaries, knowing which CEO prefers text to email, and which one wants you to ask about their daughter's piano recital before diving into quarterly strategy. Dominic saw me as overhead, but to our clients I was the bridge. And now the bridge was gone. When I got home that night I sat in silence. No music. No TV. Just the soft ticking of the clock and the echo of Dominic's words. It's not personal. But it was personal. Deeply. Because what they had underestimated and what they were about to learn is that I didn't just manage client accounts. I managed relationships that made Franklin & Associates what it was. And those relationships were about to make a choice. 3 days passed. I didn't sleep much. Not from sadness, not entirely, but from the gnawing feeling that something had been stolen from me. Not just my job, but my voice. My impact. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Texts from clients, some polite and confused, others angry. "Ruth, are you okay? What happened? Did you really leave F&A? I just renewed our contract because of you. This is insane. Please call me." Each message made something inside me sit up straighter. Then Arthur called. He sounded exhausted. "Ruth, I just landed from London and heard the news. This wasn't authorized." I let out a bitter laugh. Well, Dominic said otherwise. He claimed all partners agreed. Arthur's voice hardened. They waited until I was overseas. Pushed it through under emergency measures. Claimed it was necessary for our investor meeting. I never signed off. "Doesn't matter now," I said quietly. "It happened." Arthur sighed. "Come back. We'll fix this. Say it was a miscommunication." "You mean pretend none of it happened? That I wasn't escorted out like a shoplifter?" Silence. He finally admitted what I'd already suspected. "Dominic thinks your legacy fat. Expensive. He's looking at spreadsheets, not people." I wanted to scream, but instead I asked, "And who's managing my accounts now?" "Melissa Bennett," Arthur said reluctantly. I nearly choked. Melissa, who once told Winters Healthcare they should pivot their entire model, during a first meeting. Melissa, who had to be reminded twice not to call the CFO sweetheart. I muttered, "Good luck with that." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to ask to come back. I wasn't going to beg. But I also wasn't going to stay quiet. Later that day, a courier dropped off an envelope. Inside was a letter from Catherine Goldstein, the most connected headhunter in Boston. She'd attached a handwritten note. Heard what happened. A few firms would be lucky to have you. Let's talk. That night I had dinner with her. She wore a sharp navy blazer and sharper eyes. Let me guess, she said after our drinks arrived. Dominic thought you were too expensive. Too old school. But here's the thing. You're not just valuable. You're the asset. You're the relationship. I looked down at the job offer she slid across the table. One of them included equity. Another offered almost double my previous salary. She leaned in. They didn't just lose a director, Ruth. They lost the trust of half their portfolio. And trust doesn't grow on trees. I didn't reply. But I smiled. And for the first time in days it felt real. The following morning my phone rang at 7:38 a.m. sharp. I didn't need to check the caller ID. Tell me you're not actually gone, Catherine Winters barked before I could even say hello. I'm afraid I am, I said, pouring myself a coffee. They called it restructuring. Catherine cursed under her breath. Melissa Bennett emailed me yesterday, introducing herself as my new relationship manager. I nearly sent back a recipe for disaster. I let out a small laugh. I'm sure they'll do their best to maintain continuity. Don't give me that corporate fluff, Ruth. I've worked exclusively with you for 12 years. I didn't sign with Franklin and Associates. I signed with you. Her words sat heavy in the air, not because I was surprised, but because she was saying what no one else dared to say out loud. Where are you going next? She asked. I haven't decided yet, I replied truthfully. Well, make up your mind soon. My contract with them is up for renewal in 60 days. If you're not there, neither am I. By the end of the day, 11 more clients had reached out, all with the same message. Wherever I went, they wanted to follow. I hadn't pitched a single one of them. I hadn't even hinted. But I didn't need to. Word traveled fast in this industry. And trust? Trust traveled even faster. That night, I met with Blackwell Consulting. Unlike Franklin and Associates, they didn't talk about synergy or scale. They talked about people. You're not a line item to us, their managing director said. Your legacy. And we'd like to build the next chapter around that. When I glanced down at the offer, my breath caught. Equity partnership. Full autonomy. Team of my own. Still, I didn't give an answer. Not yet. Because that very evening, Arthur called again. I need to see you, he said. There's more going on than you know. I agreed to meet him at Harvest, the restaurant we used to celebrate every firm anniversary. When I arrived, Arthur looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He stood as I approached. Ruth, thank you. I've been trying to undo this mess, but Dominic's consolidating power faster than I imagined. He's already making a play for my position. So now you want me back to protect yourself? I asked not unkindly. Arthur didn't deny it. Instead he said, come back. Not as director. As chief client officer. Partner. Direct line to me. More autonomy than before. It was tempting. So tempting. But I'd heard this song before. And this time I wasn't going to let sentiment cloud judgment. Over the next week, I met with all 3 firms Catherine had recommended. The meetings blurred together. Glass offices, power suits, polite smiles. But what stood out was the shift in tone once the topic turned to client relationships. You're not just a hire, one CEO told me bluntly. You're a migration event. I laughed at that, but I understood what he meant. They didn't just want me, they wanted the trust I'd spent 25 years building. Trust that Franklin and Associates had let slip through their fingers like sand. Still, the decision wasn't easy. Blackwell Consulting made the strongest impression. They were smaller, more agile, and reminded me of what Franklin used to be before the suits and slide decks took over. Their offer included an equity partnership, a dedicated team, and a clear runway to shape the client strategy from the ground up. I was leaning in that direction when Thomas, my former assistant, texted me late Thursday night. Dominic's spiraling. Clients are threatening to walk. Arthur looks like he's aged 10 years in 2 days. F&A is bleeding. Then came the real surprise. A call from Jeffrey Hammond at the Boston Business Journal. Ms. Pearson, he began. I'm working on a story about the leadership fallout at Franklin and Associates. Multiple sources mentioned you by name. Care to comment? I paused. I'm not comfortable discussing internal matters, I replied cautiously. Understood, Hammond said. But would you like to respond to the letter signed by 26 clients asking for Dominic Hayes to be removed as managing partner? I sat frozen. 26. I hadn't organized anything. I hadn't even returned half the messages in my inbox. But somehow, the truth of my departure had sparked something. By morning, Arthur called again. 70% of our client base is threatening to leave, he said. The board's in chaos. We need you back. As full equity partner. And Dominic? There's a vote tonight. It was everything I'd once wanted, but I had already made my decision. I picked up the phone and called Catherine Goldstein. I'm going with Blackwell, I said. She didn't miss a beat. Smart woman. They're finalizing the announcement now. Anything you want added to the terms? Yes, I said. I want something poetic. She laughed. I think I know exactly what you mean. At exactly 8:45 a.m., I stepped back into the Franklin and Associates office for the first time since the day I was escorted out. The receptionist's eyes widened. Miss Pearson, are you here for the all-hands meeting? I nodded. Arthur is expecting me. The elevator ride was silent, but my heart thundered in my chest. Not from nerves, but from the weight of poetic justice. The moment those doors opened, I could feel it. Tension thick in the air. The conference room was packed. Senior partners, junior staff, board members, even those who typically attended remotely had flown in. Arthur stood at the head of the table, visibly relieved to see me. Dominic was nowhere in sight. Arthur began speaking as the door shut behind me. As many of you are aware, we've been facing significant client concerns following recent restructuring decisions. I'm pleased to announce that Ruth Pearson has agreed to return to Franklin and Associates as a full equity partner and the new head of our client relations division. Gasps rippled through the room. I could see heads turning, whispers spreading. But I raised a hand gently. Actually, I said, stepping forward, I'd like to clarify a few things. Arthur blinked. Of course. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people who had once worked alongside me, some with genuine respect, others who had stayed silent during my exit. I appreciate the gesture, I said, voice steady. But I'm not coming back to Franklin and Associates. A murmur rolled through the crowd. I've accepted a partnership at Blackwell Consulting, I continued. And as of this morning, Blackwell has completed negotiations to acquire controlling interest in Franklin and Associates. The room fell into stunned silence. Then chaos. Audible gasps, chairs shifting, papers rustling. Arthur's face had gone completely pale. This transition will begin next week, I said calmly. And I've been asked to lead the integration process for our client portfolios. There are no plans for mass layoffs, unless they're deemed necessary for efficiency. Arthur stepped forward, eyes wide with disbelief. Ruth, what have you done? Nothing more than recognize my value, I said softly. You taught me that once. Behind me, I could hear Thomas give a low whistle. I didn't look back. As the meeting dissolved into disbelief and disorder, I walked out, head high, posture straight, into the hallway where the elevator waited. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine Winters. Just heard the news. Dinner tonight. I want to talk about Winters Healthcare's future with Blackwell. I stepped into the elevator, smiled to myself, and pressed the button for the lobby. The morning after the acquisition announcement, the front page of the Boston Business Journal made everything official. Blackwell acquires Franklin and Associates after client exodus, the headline declared. Buried in the 15th paragraph, one line read, Ruth Pearson, former Senior Director of Client Relations, has accepted a partnership at Blackwell and will oversee the integration of Franklin and Associates client portfolios. It was clinical, understated, and yet, absolutely seismic. 3 weeks ago, I'd been walked out with a box of memories. Now, I was responsible for stitching together two firms, one I had helped build and one I would now help shape into the future. I started working from Blackwell's offices immediately. The integration was smoother than anyone had expected, partly because I insisted on retaining most of Franklin's staff. I knew who was competent, who cared, who'd stayed quiet, not out of disloyalty but out of fear. I didn't hold it against them. Former colleagues began showing up at my office one by one. Some just wanted reassurance. Others came with apologies, suddenly remembering how they'd always respected my work or disagreed with Dominic's tactics. I listened, nodded, and moved forward. My focus wasn't on grudges. It was on rebuilding something better. A week later, Arthur requested a meeting. He looked different. Thinner. Quieter. Older than he had just a month before. His voice was low when he finally said it. "You orchestrated this." I met his eyes, calm and clear. "No. I simply recognized my value. You didn't." He leaned back as if my words had landed like a punch to the gut. "You're in control now." "Not control," I said. "Influence. There's a difference. One you used to understand." Then I handed him a document across the table. It was an offer. A 3-year advisory consulting position. No management responsibilities. A generous exit, considering the circumstances. Arthur stared at the paper. "And if I don't take it?" "Then you walk away with nothing but your ownership payout," I said evenly. "It's your choice." He said nothing. But the look in his eyes told me he already knew which path he'd take. By the 6th week, Blackwell Franklin Consulting had settled into its new rhythm. We occupied 2 floors of a gleaming downtown tower. The quarterly numbers came in. Client retention through the transition exceeded 95%. Revenue was up 23% year over year. Even the 3 clients who had left during the initial chaos had already returned. My assistant knocked and stepped in. "Ms. Winters is here for your lunch appointment." I smiled and stood. Catherine Winters, sharp as ever in her tailored suit, met me in the lobby. As we stepped out into the crisp fall air, she turned to me and said, "Congratulations. The industry's still talking about it. Most elegant corporate takeover I've ever seen." I laughed softly. "It wasn't a takeover. It was a correction." She raised a brow. "Correction or not, you proved what I've always known. In this business, the relationships are the real assets. Everything else is just noise." I nodded. And for the first time in a long time I felt completely at peace. 6 months after the acquisition, the storm had long passed, but its lessons remained. From my corner office overlooking the Boston skyline, I reviewed the latest quarterly performance reports. Client portfolios had not only stabilized, they had grown. The integration between Blackwell and Franklin was no longer a transition, it was a success story. I received a steady flow of visitors now. Colleagues, clients, even competitors who used to brush me off now asked for meetings. They weren't coming to meet Ruth the survivor. They came because I'd become something more, a builder, a fixer, someone who turned chaos into structure and loss into leadership. Dominic, I heard, had landed a job at a much smaller consultancy. His reputation was still bruised, no shattered, by what had unfolded. When people in the industry spoke his name now, it came with a smirk or a warning. Arthur, on the other hand, had taken the consulting role we offered. Our interactions were polite, cordial, but distant. He knew what he'd lost. So did I. Some wounds don't need revenge. Time handles that all on its own. One afternoon, as I walked past the reception area, a junior analyst stopped me. "Miss Pearson, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "For staying," she said, eyes sincere. "You didn't have to. But you did. And now this place feels like it has a soul again." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. Not a corporate smile, a real one. Later that week, I received a letter from a former client who had followed me during the shakeup. He wrote, "You once said relationships weren't scalable, they were personal. That's why we stayed. And that's why we'll keep staying." I pinned the note to my office corkboard, next to a faded photo from my early days at Franklin and Associates. Back when I was just one woman with a Rolodex, a phone, and a belief that trust still mattered in business. That belief had cost me everything once. But in the end, it gave me more than I ever imagined. And that, I realized, is the power of knowing your worth. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like the video. It really helps more people discover our channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And leave a comment to let us know what part hit you the hardest. Your support keeps us going and allows us to keep bringing real, emotional stories to life. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We appreciate every single one of you. Don't forget to subscribe, And we'll see you in the next story. Take care and stay strong.